I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. So here we go again. The Republicans held another series of hearings this week that backfired spectacularly, where they focused on issues like weaponization and spreading their COVID conspiracy theories and trying to attack America's support of Ukraine. But ultimately, in these forums, in these hearings where it's more than just sound bites, the Democrats have been able to just use facts and logic to expose all of this disinformation and conspiracy theories. Like, holding these hearings is quite possibly the worst decision these MAGA Republicans could make, since they are not operating from positions of fact. So let's just go through what transpired at these committee hearings. So let's start off with the fact that MAGA Republican Congressmember Matt Gaetz tried grilling Dr. Colin Kahl, and I put grilling in quotes, the Defense Undersecretary for Policy in the Biden administration. And Gaetz was literally using propaganda from the Global Times. That is the source that he and the MAGA Republicans were quoting. Just to be clear, the Global Times is a daily tabloid newspaper under the auspices of the Chinese Communist Party's flagship newspaper, The People's Daily, commenting on international issues from a Chinese ultra-nationalistic perspective. So this is Matt Gaetz citing the Global Times as evidence in support of his conspiracy theory. Play the clip.
Is the Azov battalion getting access to U.S. weapons?
Not that I'm aware of, but if you have information,
I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the Global Times investigative report that that talks about training. It's from the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensics Research Lab, citing that the Azov battalion was even getting stuff as far back as 2018.
Without objection, so ordered.
Any reason to disagree with that assessment, Dr.
Is this the? I'm sorry. Is this the Global Times from China?
No, this is. Well,
that's what you read.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, would that be a reason?
As a general matter, I don't take Beijing's propaganda.
Well, no. Yeah, but just
value.
tell me if the allegation is true or false. I mean,
I don't have any evidence one way or the other. As a general matter, I don't take Beijing's propaganda at face value.
Fair enough. I would agree with that assessment. April.
Next, I'll show you this clip of the freshman Congress member from Florida, Democrat Jared Moskowitz, who calls Donald Trump President Snowflake and says that, okay, you're here talking about the influence over media or tech. It was the Trump administration literally called Jimmy Kimmel's boss because he didn't like the jokes that Jimmy Kimmel was saying. And also, we've now learned that Fox was giving confidential information about the Biden campaign over to Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Play this clip.
Additionally, Mr. Chairman, it's come out not just with Twitter, but it's come out that Donald Trump had White House staff call the Disney Corporation to try and censor Jimmy Kimmel because the former president didn't like his jokes. And to quote Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Kimmel has responded to this, saying that President Karen demanded to speak to my manager in order to censor my free speech through corporate ownership. Additionally, not dealing with government censorship, but it's also come out, Mr. Chairman, that during the last campaign, Fox News provided Trump's son-in-law with confidential information about President Biden's ads and President Biden's debate strategy, trying to put their finger on the pulse of the election. And so, listen, I applaud you guys for going back 5 years, because we're going to find out that President Snowflake, through calling Twitter and calling Disney, was trying to hurt people's free speech because, it upset him. He didn't like being called names. And so you guys deserve credit that you want to get to the bottom of who did Donald Trump call, who did Jared Kushner call, who did the chiefs of staff in the Trump administration call to take down Americans' free speech, not just on social media, but also on television. I yield back.
Here is Democratic Congressmember Jamie Raskin responding to Lauren Boebert as she tries to inject disinformation, blaming COVID on President Biden. And Jamie Raskin points out, look, Donald Trump, your fearless leader, and I put that in quotes again, your leader was praising the Chinese President Xi and said he was in communications with Xi and that Xi was doing a great job with COVID. You recall that? Here, play this clip of Congressman Jamie Raskin.
You're right. President Trump was in office when the COVID virus was released from a lab in China, from the Wuhan lab. And he tried to make that very clear that this came from China. And reporters regularly dismiss that.
I appreciate the gentlelady's passion. There are two facts that she should perhaps be alerted to. One is that Donald Trump, on more than 20 different occasions, defended the performance of the Chinese government, and specifically President Xi, in terms of his treatment of COVID-19, and said he was doing a wonderful job and a great job, and they were working closely and they were constantly in touch. So if there's a problem with the Chinese government unleashing a virus which has not been proven anywhere, but it certainly could be true, you would have to pin that on your favorite president, Donald Trump, not on Joe Biden. The second thing is President Trump's own special advisor on COVID-19, Deborah Birx, I'm sure you're aware, and I'm sure you've read her book, said that the lethal recklessness of Donald Trump's policies about COVID-19 cost Americans hundreds of thousands of lives. So you don't have to believe anybody on the Democratic side of the aisle. That's Donald Trump's own special advisor on COVID-19. Thank you for yielding, and I happily yield back.
Jamie Raskin was just on fire during these hearings. This is Jamie Raskin now addressing the chairman of the Oversight Committee, MAGA Republican James Comer, and saying, Chairman Comer, over this weekend you said that you and the MAGA Republicans were out there threatening a private company, threatening AT&T, and saying that if they didn't put Newsmax back on DirecTV, didn't put him back on TV, that there was going to be consequences. You said that you were in communications basically threatening a company. Play this clip.
Twitter and Facebook. And if we're going to confront this problem of people using their public offices and state power to try to intimidate, then let's do it in a comprehensive way. Let's take an example, Mr. Chairman, that you'll recognize immediately. Over the weekend, you appeared on Newsmax, and you boasted that you had told AT&T, a private company, that they needed to restore Newsmax to carrying DirecTV or face the consequences. To quote you verbatim, quote, I'm very upset that DirecTV doesn't have Newsmax on there. I've been in constant communication with the leadership of AT&T and DirecTV. I've strongly encouraged them to meet with your CEO, Mr. Ruddy, to get this worked out, or else. Now, I have no opinion about whether or not AT&T should carry Newsmax. Apparently, it was purely a business decision, according to the Wall Street Journal, and I'll ask unanimous consent to introduce this editorial by the Wall Street Journal called The Right's Wrong Attack on DirecTV over Newsmax. A commercial dispute isn't about censoring conservatives.
Without objection.
So we can submit that. There was also a letter written by 42 of our colleagues, including the chairman, directly to AT&T, demanding that they carry Newsmax. Now, and the premise of it was there was some kind of left-wing conspiracy or so on, and the Wall Street Journal completely debunked that, saying political coercion of business is as distasteful from the right as it is from the left. But if threatening official coercive pressure like this, follow our orders or else, applied against not just private social media entities, which is what they're proposing in this bill, but against any media entity, it would transform politics in America in the meaning of the First Amendment. But if we're going to do it, let's do it. And the First Amendment says if this is going to apply to the internet, if it's going to protect Twitter, arguably, which is the conceit or pretense of this bill, it should also protect AT&T against getting coerced into making a deal it doesn't want to make and spending millions of dollars it doesn't want to spend with Newsmax. So it is hard to...
Now here's another clip of Congressman Jared Moskowitz, the Democratic freshman from Florida, also addressing the oversight chair, James Comer, and talking about how the COVID disinformation, if you want to talk about COVID disinfo was spreading under Donald Trump. Play this clip.
I just want to relay something that was just stated during the roundtable. Dr. McCary just said today at the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic's roundtable the following, and I quote, "The greatest perpetrator of misinformation during the pandemic was the United States government." End quote.
Based on those comments, I too would like to get more information. I mean, was that person specifically talking about the misinformation that President Trump put out about maybe putting light into the body could get rid of COVID, or maybe using a horse tranquilizer to get rid of COVID? Was he talking about the misinformation about maybe we can do like a cleaning of the body, as misinformation? And so, I'd like to find out the misinformation that was put out. COVID's going to go away in like a couple of months. That misinformation, there was a lot of misinformation that was put out. And so I would love, we'd maybe hold a hearing on that, Mr. Chairman. I think that would be fantastic. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. See anyone else?
And of course, we have a clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene. She wants to make her presence known during these committee hearings. And here's Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about how under the Biden administration, a significantly larger amount of fentanyl was stopped at the border than under the Trump administration. In other words, Trump let in more fentanyl, which she uses to criticize President Biden. I don't think it's really the criticism that she thinks it is. Play the clip.
Fentanyl. I want you to know that in 2020, there were 4.8 thousand pounds of fentanyl seized by CBP. But in 2021, fiscal year 2021, it increased to 11.2 thousand pounds of fentanyl was seized by the CBP. That is a direct result of Biden administration failure policies. Now, here we are in to date, fiscal year 2023, they have already seized 12.5 thousand pounds of fentanyl. The Biden administration is failing this country by not protecting our border and securing our border and stopping Chinese fentanyl from being brought into our country illegally by the cartels, and people are dying every single day because of it.
Here's another clip of Democratic Congressmember Jamie Raskin reminding everybody at the committee hearing that the only evidence of government interference with Twitter, if we want to talk about that again, is when Donald Trump actually used the government officials to threaten Twitter to take down mean posts about him, including a post that called him a PAB. And Jamie Raskin says, I'm not going to actually use what those words are. But play the clip.
The only real evidence we could find, you'll recall, Mr. Chairman, was about Donald Trump. He didn't like somebody on Twitter calling him a PAB. I'm using the acronym there out of deference to our national audience. And he got White House officials to call Twitter to tell them to take it down. I still haven't heard a single word from anyone on your side of the aisle denouncing that. There are numerous other examples. President Trump was so upset by a joke made by Jimmy Kimmel that he directed, again, White House personnel to call up the Disney Corporation executives there to complain and demand that action be taken against apparently disloyal comedians. At least a couple of phone calls were made in that direction. So this does happen, there's no doubt. But for some reason, none of the focus is on the actual events where we know this did take place. The only known serial official violator of the rights of the social media companies to be free of government speech reprisal, Donald Trump, happens to be their hero, and he's no longer in office. So their bill, in pursuit of the fantasy conspiracy to oppress right-wing speech, would turn the federal government upside down now with a series of wasteful bureaucratic paperwork assignments for no reason at all requiring every agency to submit a report to the OMB listing every instance during the past 5 years in which an employee of an agency communicated with the Internet Computer Service on something completely lawful, on something totally within the course of their work. All of this has got to be reported. And if that's not enough, the bill also requires agencies to complete these reviews within 90 days. So even without speaking to the agencies, they would need to implement it. My colleagues should know that this is simply not feasible. And this is...
Here's Congressman Eric Swalwell pointing out this performative gesture that Matt Gaetz wanted to require, or that he is requiring, which is that the Pledge of Allegiance is stated multiple times. I mean, they already do the pledge at the outset when Congress convenes, but Gaetz wanted and he did put forward a resolution to basically say it has to be done again before every committee hearing meeting. And so Eric Swalwell said, well, it would be, by the way, if you thought you were going to own the libs with that, like, we voted in favor of it, but we did say maybe you can vet the people who will lead the Pledge of Allegiance to make sure, I don't know, that there's not going to be insurrectionists. And Eric Swalwell points out, I believe it was a Republican who stated, it's not like we're going to let murderers in, but actually the very first person that Matt Gaetz had brought into the Capitol building to state the Pledge of Allegiance actually was a murderer, is a murderer, an actual murderer. Here, play this clip. It's hard to believe this is even true. Play this clip, but it is.
One of the very first committees, the very first committee hearing of this Congress, Mr. Gaetz, after we had all agreed on what the committee's plan was going to be, it was going to be voice voted, everyone agreed, Mr. Gaetz wanted to offer an amendment to say the Pledge of Allegiance. That's great. Every single person on our side supported that. Now, I don't think he really genuinely cares about saying the Pledge of Allegiance, but he wanted to do it, again, to own the libs and to see if we would vote against it. We didn't. But who did he bring in here to say the Pledge of Allegiance? Who did he parade in here in a uniform? Somebody that he met at a gun club, he said, locally. Okay. Mr. Cicilline had the crazy idea that maybe we should vet the people who come in here, make sure they're not insurrectionists. Mr. McClintock, I am not kidding you. Mr. McClintock said, well, it's not like we're going to invite somebody who committed murder. No, he literally said that. It's not like we're going to invite somebody who committed murder. Okay, well, who did Mr. Gaetz bring? He brought Corey Beekman. Corey Beekman in 2019 was in a standoff with the Michigan police after he was arrested and charged with murder, assault with intent to commit murder, and 2 counts of felony firearm possession. The family of the victims said Mr. Gaetz doing that, it was like getting a dagger stuck in our heart again. We were infuriated when we first saw it. I was disgusted with the whole thing. That's why there's a trust deficit here. You pull off a public stunt to try and own the libs, and what you did was you brought in a guy who allegedly shot 2 people and killed one of them. That's where the trust deficit is. So you can play your games, conduct your stunts. We're here to get shit done.
Oh, and here's a great clip. This is the Democratic freshman Congress member from New York, Dan Goldman, in his questioning of Pinal County in Pinal County, Arizona. Their sheriff there is Mark Lamb. And Mark Lamb basically does this whole like performative thing where he's like the biggest MAGA supporter. He's the biggest Trump supporter that there is. And Sheriff Lamb speaks at all of these Trump rallies. So Dan Goldman got Sheriff Lamb, the MAGA Republican sheriff, to admit that there was no election fraud capable of overturning the 2020 election, which is a direct contravention of kind of what you need to do in MAGA. Watch this incredible clip.
So let me ask you this question. Do you think that there was fraud that had a material impact on the results of the 2020 election?
As a law enforcement official, I have seen zero evidence that would show me otherwise.
Right.
And by the way, just so you know how significant that was, just here is a photograph of Sheriff Lamb just speaking at one of the MAGA events, So that Mark Lamb has now stepped into a hearing where he admits that there wasn't election fraud. is definitely a major, major blow to Donald Trump. It's also the truth. It's also a very basic reality. But Dan Goldman, a former federal prosecutor, getting Mark Lamb to admit it under oath. Now, here is Representative Dan Goldman as well, talking about introducing what he wants to refer to, or he'll be referring to as the Kellyanne Conway Act, to make it a criminal conduct to violate the Hatch Act, as Trump did repeatedly. Play the clip.
But you know what Ms. Conway's response to her serial violations of the Hatch Act were? She said, quote, "If you're trying to silence me through the Hatch Act, it's not going to work. Let me know when the jail sentence starts." Mr. Sessions said earlier today that the purpose of H.R. 140 is to try to stop anyone from using the White House for political purposes. And so in that vein, today I'm offering the Kellyanne Conway Amendment that will allow for prison sentences under criminal violations of the law for knowing and intentional violations of the Hatch Act. This amendment will add a criminal provision to the Hatch Act to prevent the kind of blatant disregard for the law demonstrated by Ms. Conway and her colleagues in the Trump administration. Unlike the bill that we are marking up today, which is a solution without a problem, the Hatch Act violations are a problem that needs a solution.
Here is a video of Marjorie Taylor Greene having difficulty counting numbers. Play the clip.
What it did to our children's math and reading levels is horrific. School closures brought them to the lowest levels in years. English 8th graders, math proficiency dropped by 7 points. Reading levels dropped by 2 points. There are 1,524,524 and 481. This is over 1 million, 1.5 million.
And finally, here is a clip of Representative Sean Casten, a Democrat from Illinois. This isn't in a committee meeting, but it's on the House floor. And I just thought it was a really significant speech. So I want to play it for you now. But here, Representative Casten is talking about how MAGA Republicans, all of a sudden, when capitalism doesn't work for them, now capitalism is too woke. It's too woke for them. And I think Sean Casten, this Democratic Congress member, I love how he's framing this issue, because this is the truth, that MAGA Republicans are not for free markets. They're not for freedom. Their policies oppose all of it. Their policies do not oppose capitalism. I mean, frankly, the MAGA Republicans, their policy is socialism for billionaires only. That's what their policy is. But here, play this incredible portion of the floor speech from Representative Casten, Democrat from Illinois.
Let me dumb this down for you all. 10 years ago, if you shifted your investment portfolio away from fossil energy towards climate-friendly investments, you would be richer today. Now, my Republican colleagues, you all talk a good game about how you're into personal freedom, and yet you are taking individual investors' freedom away from them with this bill. You all talk a good game about how government should not be picking winners and losers. Why do you all keep picking losers? 2011, a guy named Hugo Chavez, he redirected Venezuelan oil worker pensions into a Ponzi scheme running by a political ally. And now my Republican colleagues, who a couple of weeks ago voted to oppose socialism in all its forms, are thinking that Hugo Chavez guy seems pretty smart. Let's do the same thing. You know what you call capitalism when you're losing? Woke capitalism. So, if you all are afraid of free markets, if you want to destroy workers' pensions, if you oppose individual freedom, if you want to force your constituents to invest in proven losers, then please vote for this resolution. Be honest about your values. For everyone else, vote no. I plan to do so proudly and honestly. Yield back.
So I was so honored to share these clips with you and the highlights from these committee hearings. And again, I think this format is actually very, very helpful for the truth. These committee hearing formats. The MAGA Republicans are used to just going on Fox or whatever their right-wing echo chamber media is and just spreading the disinformation, not being challenged, and just given a platform to lie and lie and lie. But here, when they are confronted with the truth, and not just confronted with the truth, but the Democrats have so many smart members of Congress with truly incredible backgrounds who are able to present this information in compelling ways, in fact-based ways, and really show the contrast to the American people. So when you see these committee hearings, they're certainly not playing out the way the MAGA Republicans had hoped for. And when they talk about weaponization, when they want to talk about disinformation, when they want to talk about foreign policy, when they want to talk about the insurrection, when they want to talk about all of these issues, the projection and disinformation that works for them on Fox, frankly, does not work in the real world, because facts matter. The truth matters. Decency matters. Actually supporting the United States of America matters, not the performative BS. That's what actually matters. So I'm so honored to have shared these clips with you. If you can, please hit the subscribe button below. We are on our way here at the MeidasTouch Network to 1 million subscribers. We're calling it the March to 1 million subscribers in March. Let's see if we can hit that 1 million subs number in March. Also, wherever you get your audio podcasts, search the MeidasTouch podcast and subscribe. I think you'll really enjoy the podcast I do with my two younger brothers. It's one of the top podcasts on the Apple charts. Again, just whatever app you use for your audio, just search MeidasTouch podcast, and it's free to subscribe. Also, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We have a lot of exclusive content that you can only get on our Patreon. It's a paid membership thing, but it helps grow this independent media platform since we're not funded by any outside investors. So wherever you are in the world, if you go to patreon.com/MeidasTouch, you'll be able to support the growth of this 100% independent platform. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Have a great day.
The best part of waking up? MAGA Tears in my cup. Check out the new MAGA Tears mug available now at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com. It's 100% union made right here in the USA. I know I'm not tired of winning yet. How about you? Get yours today.